Ringo Starr is one of the most iconic musicians living today. Famed drummer for the Beatles and a prolific songwriter in his own right, at 81, Ringo's gearing up to release his latest EP, Change the World. Following the Beatles' breakup in 1970, Ringo released a run of successful solo albums and chart-topping hits. In addition to a budding film career and work as a session player for artists like George Harrison, Bob Dylan, and the Beach Boys, Ringo also formed his all-star band, who for the past 30 years have included a rotating lineup of some of the world's best musicians. Rick Rubin and Ringo recorded this interview the day it was announced that Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts passed away. On today's episode, you'll hear Ringo reminisce about partying with Charlie and Led Zeppelin's drummer John Bonham. Ringo also talks about how he was a drunk heckler at Beatles shows before he joined the band, and why Paul McCartney was the only Beatle who would share a room with him.
This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond.
Here's Rick Rubin and Ringo Starr.
There you are. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm good, Rick. I was just on the phone to Paul, who gave me great advice of how to deal with you.
What did he say?
He said you're a wonderful human being.
It's a weird day for us to be talking because Charlie's passing. And I just wanted to ask you, any fond memories of Charlie?
I have a lot of fond memories of Charlie. And, just because you like music, my line always used to be, over the years, what do you think of Charlie? I said, well, Charlie plays even less than I do. And any musician got that one. But, we had some nights out. Someone was just telling me Charlie's quote, well, what do you think about Ringo's drumming? He said, I don't know much of that about his drumming, but we have a great time when we go out together.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, it's sad. It's like...
Yeah.
But it happens, that's the deal.
That's part of growing up.
Yeah. But he was a great player. He held those guys together, for God's sake. His job was harder than mine.
Yeah, he was incredible. Incredible. I feel like as good as it's ever been done.
Yeah. Well, we're from the school where you don't have to be busy. And my absolute, when anyone tells me or asks me how to play, I say, well, you don't need, if the singer's singing, you don't need to be doing drum boogie. You know what I mean? Just hold them together, and then you do fills. That's how I work.
Yes.
With the song,
Something that changed with your style, though, like in the early Beatles stuff, it was more straightforward, playing a beat through the song. But then as time went on, it got more almost orchestral, like answering what the other things were going on. How did that start? How did the switch happen?
I think that just was a natural progression. Well, I actually understand what you're saying. And, when Abbey Road came out 2 years ago now, I think, the remaster, they had a big get-together at Abbey Road and friends and family and all the kids. And they had a playback. And I'm sitting next to Paul and I'm going, man, I'm much too busy. And, if you're listening to Bathroom Window and that side of that album, I got the new drums, a new kit of drums, and they had actually calf heads. I never had calf heads. They were always plastic. And the depth, everything I'd been trying to get with the tea towels and putting packs of cigarettes to deaden them, because of the skin, the depth was so great. So, she came in through bathroom window. It's all over those tracks. I think that's just how I felt then. I just loved the sounds. I was going to put them on, I just did a master class. Yes. And I was trying to tell them, there's parts the drummer plays. Like bump, bump, diggity-doo, diddly-diddly-doo. That's a part. And then there's fills, ba-dum, ba-bum, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-dum. There is a difference to it. They all think like it's all fills. Well, no, not really. It's part of it.
Besides Charlie, from the old days, who were the other drummers that you were impressed by? Who were the ones you liked?
Well, I was impressed by a lot of different drummers, but, how weird it may sound, I only ever practiced once, and then I learned how to join in bands of Liverpool. We all made the same mistakes and got it together. And when I played a record, Solomon Burke, doesn't matter who, I listened to the record. And it wasn't like listening, the drums were just good. And Al Green's I'm a Ram. It's like one of those moments in my life. I'm in London in an apartment George and I shared, but he was out, and Klaus Vormann and I were playing records. And he goes, I'm around. He does this crazy, it's like part of it. And that sort of helped me on. Well, I can make parts now, you know what I mean? That blew me away. It's such a simple move that it changed my life and my way of drumming, just that hi-hats.
Amazing. It's amazing how we hear the things that we need to hear at the right time to move us on our journey, It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you can't plan it.
No, it's impossible.
It just happens. I mean, it's like the ever-continuing story of sliding doors. If Klaus hadn't have come over, in this moment, if I hadn't have been in or whatever, we'd have had another drink and forgot that, whatever. But it moved me along.
I wanted to ask you about your singing on the new EP, because it sounds like you're singing better than ever. And
thanks. Coming from you, brother, that's good.
No, you say it's amazing.
I think the more you do it, you know what I mean? It's, I get a lot of help from my engineer who says, let's do that again.
You do a cover of Rock Around the Clock, and I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first time you ever heard the song Rock Around the Clock?
Like it was yesterday.
Tell me.
Yeah, so I'm in hospital. I have my 14th birthday in hospital, and we're weeks away from my 15th birthday. And I don't want to be there for my 15th birthday. And I'm well now. I'm out of bed. I'm walking. I'm running, we're playing. I'm 14. And so my mum and I tried to get me out before my birthday. And we went to talk to the doctors, and they checked me. And anyway, a couple of weeks before I was 15, they said, you can leave, I had TB. So we came out, we went down to London to my stepdad's family and said hi to them. And then we came back. And then a couple of weeks later, my grandparents, who brought me up with my mother, were going to the Isle of Man. That's an island just off England. It was like the holiday spot. It was like the Florida of the north of England. They would go over, the guys from the factories and that would kiss me quick hats, and, they were the lads. Anyway, Rock Around the Clock, the movie was playing. And I went to see the movie. And besides Bill Haley blew me away, they ripped up the cinema. They pulled the seats out. They were throwing them at the screen. They were just rock and roll crazy. And I thought, that's good. And, that was probably another moved me to music. But, the thing with Bill Haley was, he was always like your dad. We were teenagers, young teenagers, and he was just like your dad. He played rock. He was the only one. And the BBC actually played him several times, because they played nothing. The BBC was so boring, living in the past. But then when Eddie Cochran, Elvis, of course, and, Buddy, all that crowd came out, it was like, well, right, let's rock. Rock sort of came to its place. But we did have a lot of incredible sort of blues player. I love the blues, and everyone knows my story with Lightning Hopkins. And a lot of other players, of course. And country came out, got into that, loved that. And I was on the road to music now, and I was playing with Liverpool band. Then I ended up with Rory. And while I was with Rory, Brian Epstein knocked on the door. I was a musician. We didn't get up till noon. Bang, bang. The Beatles are doing a lunchtime session. Would you, Pete can't make it. Could you come down? That's where I started playing with them. And then out of the blue, we were on this gig for a holiday camp. 3-month gig in those days was incredible. And I got a phone from Brian, so that moved that on, you know what I mean? So just being where you're being it's like, there's no explanation really. You can just say, it happened,
Meant to be. Meant to be.
The fun part of when I joined the Beatles was all the people in Liverpool saying, "You're not leaving Rory, are you?" Because Rory was the biggest band at the time. I said, "Yeah, I'm leaving. That front line, I love that front line." And that's how it started.
Did you ever record in the studio prior to being in the Beatles?
No, we did a demo. Rory and the Hurricanes did a demo in Germany, like the Beatles did with Tony Sheridan, an acetate. And the fun side of that was I lost mine somewhere in the shuffle of life. So I called Johnny Guitar, who was the guitarist in Rory's band. And I said, "Man, I've lost mine. Would you make me a coffee?" And he says, "No." He wasn't even make me a coffee. Okay. Yeah. But that was the only time I've ever been near a studio.
Was it different playing in the studio than playing on stage?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because, to this day, I love the audience. I love the audience. They know that, so they love me. We have a love fest. And, my mother said a thing years before. She said, "You know what, son? You always seem at your happiest when you're playing." That was a great line I remembered. And I did. I love to play. I play now. I never practiced, but if you came with a piano or a bass, didn't matter, guitar, I'd sit with you all night. I would play with another person, but not by myself. I never liked being bombed on. It's like, what? It's not what it's about.
Oh, tell me about skiffle music, because skiffle music was before all of the music styles that you talked about.
Skiffle music, if you had the instrument, you were in the band. And I had a snare drum, so I was in the band. But the first band, Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group, and Lonnie Donegan, and it was like, New Orleans house party blues, the Rock Island Line is the mighty good. What do we know about the Rock Island Line? Nothing. But, we're in Liverpool. But songs like that, and "Hey Lily, Lily, Lily." And, the laugh was you could play anything skiffle in one chord. But anyway, next door neighbor and worked in the same factory was a guy called Eddie Miles, who liked to call himself Eddie Clayton. But he was an incredible guitar player. And I had my snare drum, and then I had my friend Roy in the factory. And he took up the tea chest vest, just a tea chest with a broom, pole, and a piece of string. So he turned into the bass player. So we were the trio. And we went round playing skiffle songs, and that's how it started. And, one of the things we did in those days, we'd play weddings, we'd play anywhere. We didn't care. And we were playing at this dance, and people were dancing to us, but we had no sense of time, so everything would get faster and faster, like an express. and it'd be, "Can you slow it down? Can you slow down?" But we'd, "Hey, Lily, 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 hey, Lily, Lily, Lily." We'd get excited or whatever. And anyway, so I learned my lesson, and I'm a great timekeeper. But at the beginning, you don't know. You're just excited.
So skiffle music
gave us all a chance to play.
Yeah.
And the government didn't know what they were doing when we used to have the call if you had to go in the army at 18. And they came out and made an announcement that after the wars in the 50s. They said, if you were born after November 1939, you don't have to come in the army. I said, wow, great. Because, I was like an apprentice, because if you had a job or something of experience, they'd put you like on the back bench, you know what I mean? But if you were just a working guy, they'd take you in the army. So that was like an incredible moment, because I just thought, okay, another 8 months, 9 months. How you doing, Captain? So anyway, that's what happened there.
And then we don't think of skiffle as a popular music in the U.S., but it sounds like in the U.K.,
huge.
Skiffle music was essentially coming from America, the roots of it?
Yeah, it was America. It's like the blues. We'd do a blues song, the Stones would do a blues song, and it wasn't really big in America. And then everyone got into the blues because we were passing it back.
Yeah.
I was blessed, or we were blessed, we lived in Liverpool because it was a port. So all the guys, the 18 to 24s would go to America. It was the merchant navy. They weren't in the navy. And they'd bring all these records back, and then they'd spend all their money getting drunk, and then they'd sell their records, and we were picking those records up. It was incredible, the records we had in those days. So that, you have to thank them.
Besides Rock Around the Clock, what were the songs when you heard them life-changing songs from childhood?
Well, I'm a sentimental fool. Eddie Calvert, Oh My Papa. And I was blessed with my stepdad because he liked big bands. He had big band fever. And like Billy Eckstine and, Billy Daniels. And I just remember the Billies he always played.
Yeah.
And he was so great with me because I'd be playing whatever I'm playing. And he'd say, have you heard this? And he'd move me up a step. And the time he said to me, have you heard this? And he never said, that shit, get it off. He just said, hey, have you heard this? And he gave me Sarah Vaughan. I said, well,
wow.
Yeah, that was far out now looking back.
Yes.
So she changed my life. She doesn't know it.
Amazing. And I bet other kids in the UK weren't hearing that kind of music.
They weren't. And Glenn Miller and all the big bands of the day. The side story to this is when we were the Beatles and we were opening for Helen Shapiro, she had this band. Do you remember the Ted Heath big band? There was a big band in England at the time, the 50s, he was huge. Anyway, they were all like his players. But anyway, we were lads, and I'm saying, yeah, hi, what are you doing? How old are you? And he'd say like 40. 40 and you're still playing. We were looking at them like these real old guys, but hey, I'm way past 40.
Did you always imagine playing music young and then getting a job? Was that always like how you imagined life going?
No, I dreamt from when I was 13 in this same hospital. This hospital had a lot to do with me because I was laying in bed that we had people come round and teach you to knit and stuff you can do in bed, and you had knit, and they brought in these maracas and tambourines and little drums and like acoustic stuff you can hit and shake. And I hit that drum and I wanted to be a drummer.
Wow.
And every time she came back, if she didn't give me a drum, I wouldn't play in the band. It was like lightning. Lightning attacked me. And I wanted to be, only from that moment, I wanted to be a drummer. And when I came out of hospital, I go around the stores. There's quite a few music stores in Liverpool. It's a pretty musical city, really. And just look at the drums. And, God's gift. I mean, my stepdad's uncle died. We lived in Liverpool. He went down to London, outside London, Romford, to go to the funeral. Little did he know, the guy was a drummer, and he saw that upstairs they had all these drums, and he asked the guy's wife, would she sell them to him? Could he buy those drums? And he brought me my first kit that gave me a snare drum that allowed me to join all those early bands.
Amazing.
It's like magic.
Something you said earlier is interesting to me, that you first heard the song that you covered in a movie. It's interesting because we think of, if you hear a song in a movie, it's because it's already popular in the world, and now it's in a movie. Then you get to see it in a movie. Yeah. But it sounds like for you, it was the opposite, where the first time you got to hear it was in a movie.
Yeah. But, Bill was huge in that time, and it was rock and roll. I mean, we'd never heard of it. We went from skiffle into rock into soul music, really. And one of the good, do you know Tommy Steele, the English singer? From the 50s and 60s. He was in the Merchant Navy, and he came back and he was starting to sing at the Two Eyes Coffee Bar in London. And they were saying, well, what do you call that music? And he'd go, I think I'm going to call it rock and roll. And all the British press, oh, he's calling it rock and roll. Like he invented it. It was so fun. Because there wasn't a lot of rock and roll interest in England at the time, Yes. It's, all the family parties I went to, it was all music from the 40s, really. Everybody had to sing.
Like show tunes.
Show tunes and stuff like that, yeah. So anyway, my moves came from out of the blue. and that made me go left or right, and in my opinion, make the right decisions.
Was it as much the energy of rock and roll that spoke to you first? Was it like, what was it? How would you describe the connection, having never heard it before?
Never heard it before. Heard Bill Haley, and he was rocking, but more than important, all those teenagers loved rock and roll. They'd been into it wherever it was. And their attitude was, if we hear rock and roll, we rip up the cinema, because they were just so excited. I mean, I remember, what was that first movie Elvis did? And it was like a Western in a way. They were country boys. He's like this big on the screen, and we're going to the cinema to see Elvis in Liverpool. And this big, all the girls screamed. And we said, well, we can't even fucking see him. There he comes. They knew he was coming, and they took off. So we were not the first band to be screamed at.
Was there a turning point when it went from feeling like you were in a band, like everybody, like the other lads that were in bands, to where it felt like, okay, this is really different being in this band?
In my own way, it's all about the band. And all my moves were to get in better bands. And as we know where we ended up. But anyway, Rory was great because it was a show band, and we had suits, and, we were dressed up from those days, more like the 50s. His big act of craziness at the end of the set was he'd be singing some rock number, and he'd get up. There was always an upright piano behind me. He'd climb on that and jump over my head to the floor. But so it was like a lot of Rory and the Hurricanes. We had Johnny Guitar was this incredible rhythm guitarist. I loved him, and he stood there and he played. I always related him to Jimi Hendrix. And Rory did his stuff, and Lou had a great voice. He would do Mailman, giving Buddy Holly's numbers, and it really worked. But when we ended up in Germany playing the Kaiserkeller, and the Beatles were playing down the road in the Bambikino, living behind the toilet, then Koshmida, the guy who owned both clubs, decided to put us both on the same club. That's where I became a huge fan of the Beatles, of that front line. I have to say, I only loved that front line. And where we got our strength from, and I think helped us become who we are, was between two bands we did. On the weekend, we did 12 hours between us. And, you get to know what you're doing, and you get to play, and you get to feel each other, And then I went back and played a month with Tony Sheridan, and, that was up the, it was like the Music City. Hamburg was great. It's very sad now. I was there a couple of years ago with Klaus, and it's all gone. But anyway, things change.
Yes. What did you see in that front line? Like, when you would go to see them play before you joined the band, what was it like? How were they different?
They were just, their vibe was so tight and great. And then, Rory and I, in the group would finish, and they'd have another 2 hours to do, or an hour or something. I was drunk by then, of course. We were teenagers. Well, not really. I was in my 20s. But I would just sit in the front, in front of the club, not in front of the stage. And just, and then, it would empty out because they were on till 4 a.m. or something. And I'd request songs. I don't remember one song I requested. You have to call Paul. And later on, I just loved the front line. It was powerful. And it was the best front line in Liverpool. That's how it was. And when I joined the band, John was talking to me one day. He says, we used to be really scared of you. Because I'd be that guy, hey, play me, 3 balls in a fat can. Come on! I'd be that heckler, and drunken heckler in the back. But yeah, something warmed my heart when I saw them. I just thought. And when I would play for them when Pete couldn't make it,
yes,
it just worked. They were great to play with. It just was good for me, And in the end, look where you end up.
Yeah, amazing.
Best move they ever made.
Yes. Arguably, yes.
Yeah. I mean, why did they pick me? I mean, what's that? There was other drummers, you know, Johnny Hutch. I mean, I like to talk about Johnny Hutch. There were 2 drummers in Liverpool, and Johnny Hutch was the other one. You know?
Yeah. No, but just the energy was right. And you can hear it when you hear the recordings to this day.
Yeah.
You can hear the excitement in the performances.
Yeah.
They're alive.
You know, no one will believe how incredible it was that we were in a studio making a record, and then you saw it as your acetate first. They're always giving you acetates on little tapes. And it was like you made a record, and we knew every time it was going to be played on the BBC, because they had a playlist. So, and we were always in the same car. And, you know, it's like, Love Me Do, or whatever's going to be on at 11:14. You know, they'd have it that precise. And we'd pull over like 11:12, get ready. Wow, it's on the radio. I mean, you know, nowadays I don't think the kids understand that. The step up is easier now, but then these were major steps, and we were making them. That was what was great.
Amazing.
It all turned out well.
Was it strange when the band decided to stop doing shows and still record?
No, that was the best move we ever made.
Tell me about it.
We went on stage, and the audience made a lot of noise. And in the end, we were playing such big venues, I couldn't hear them. You know, we were always house PA. Now it'd be great. But we were the house PA, so I'd have to like look at Paul's foot. He was always tapping. And John had that. So, oh yeah. And then if they went, I'd never heard it. But if they went, woo, oh, that's where we are. You know, woo, oh yeah, it's that song. And I couldn't do any fills. I just keeping it together. You know, because they were, ba. There was silence. Ba. I had to just keep the groove going. And, you know, I felt I was turning into a really not as good a drummer as I could be. I was just doing it for the live. And just happened, John felt the same. And then we talked to Paul and George. And we thought, well, let's take a break and go in the studio, and we can just be in the studio. And it turned out fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then we lived in the studio, and we, you know, the livest we got was on the roof. What's in the documentary coming out.
Yeah.
And even then, I was laughing with Paul the other day where there's conversations going on. I'm not in the shot even. And he said, well, who wants to play live? And you hear me going, I do. You know? And the joke with the Beatles was, including the Abbey Road, let's do it in Egypt, let's do it in the Roman amphitheater, the cover, let's walk across the road. I think that was Paul said, no, let's just walk across Abbey Road. Great. And, you know, with the roof show, we'd gone through that, let's do it in Alaska, let's do it, you know, Mount Everest, let's do it, you know, we don't have this. And Michael Lindsay was pushing for this Roman dome drone thing in somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, God knows where. But anyway, I think it was Paul. Well, let's do it on the roof. Okay. We were playing live. You know, it all happened after the big discussion of big. Well, let's just do this. You know, I mean, I mentioned Abbey Road because that is so iconic, and it's just 4 boys walking across a zebra crossing, for Christ's sake.
Yes.
People are still doing it today. They're flying in from all around the world to stand and stop the traffic, you know. The joy is we made some great music, and I'm part of it, and I love that. And it's still happening today.
It's amazing. Have you seen the Peter Jackson edit yet of the Let It Be stuff?
I've seen 6 hours edited.
Wow.
And it's from the start, and it's a band in a room, you know what I mean? And for me, the first 2 hours, it's very cold because we're at Twickenham in a film studio. It's too big. But, you know, we're there, so we got some of our troubles out. So, but I've seen the 6 hours that was the documentary. Yes. But because of lockdown, Peter Jackson is locked in New Zealand. and he has cleaned up a few bits or put a bit of this in. So I haven't seen the absolute vinyl.
Understood.
But I heard Paul had a showing of an hour 40 or 2 hours 40 at his holiday home with his holiday friends. And he said it looks great, so good.
When you saw the 6 hours, did it put you back in the room, or did you remember it differently than what you saw? Tell me about the experience.
No,
of
the
seeing
6
it.
hours was great because I saw what I'd been moaning about for the last 30 years or 40 years, that there's no joy in the first one. I didn't find one moment of joy. And when Peter took the job, God bless him, and he'd keep coming into LA with his iPad saying, look what I found, and we're laughing, we're fooling around, we're being the lads. You know, we were musicians, we were the lads, we had our ups, we had our downs. Just how it is. And Michael sort of took the down to be the most important thing in life, you know, which, God bless him, but that's what he did. And this one shows you there's joy and there's discussions and, you know, some arguments, but that's what it was always like. When you talk about discussions, I always remember years ago, early days of the Beatles, and John came in with a song, with a record. He said, I want you to play like this. And we played it, and it had 2 drummers on it. I said, but it's got 2 drummers. He said, okay. You know, just do what you do. You know, and that's how it was. You know, you did, whatever the idea was, you did what you could do. Because I wasn't an octopus then. I didn't have 4 arms. Talking about Johnny Hutch, one of the craziest things he ever did, and blew us all away. There used to be a club in Liverpool, a Saturday night all-nighter. We'd all the bands who'd been playing would end up there. But Johnny was playing with 2 sticks in each hand. You've never known so many confused people in your life. He said, what? Yeah, because he was like, that lad, all right.
What was it like when you moved from the UK to the US? You moved to California at one point in time.
Yeah, well, when we landed in New York, there was no bigger moment in my life than that. We're actually in America. All the music we love is from America, and America is big. And, you know, talking about coincidences, we got off a plane from Sweden at Heathrow. What's his face, the guy who ran it, Ed Sullivan, got off a plane from New York, didn't know anything about us. We didn't know him either, and he sort of booked us. But on the way to that show, Brian had gone to Capital that he wanted more promotion. And we landed with the number 1. I mean, you can't work that out. We landed with the number 1, thanks to Murray the K and all those DJs.
Amazing.
Far out. Because we were worried, you know, we were like, you must have heard the story that George had his sister lived in America and he went on holiday. So he'd be going around the record stores. Have you got the Beatles? Never heard of them. You know, I think we were on the Swan label then.
Yes.
And he came back saying, oh, they don't know us over there because we were used to it now. Spain, Denmark, Holland, wherever we played, it was crowded. So he was saying, oh, they don't know us. And we were like a bit worried. But anyway, we're going to America, you know, and that's what we did. And the other thing that saved our lives there, we found out from the press, because, you know, after Ed Sullivan, we all got on a train and went to Washington. We were talking to the press and they said, you know, we've all come to shit on you, to shoot you down from England. Who needs it, you know? And he said, and you started shouting at us. Oh, so we love you. Because we were answering back. We're from Liverpool. You're from New York. Said, oh, well, what do you think of that? We were giving them what they were giving us, and they couldn't believe that because everyone was so paid deference to them. Oh, yes, it's very nice. Thank you.
How would you describe the relationships within the band?
Well, the big relationship, of course, with our writers, John and Paul. And, I mean, things that went on. When I joined the band, we only ever had 2 rooms. In hotels, we were all in the same car. We had 2 rooms. We were always getting to know each other. Anyway, Paul was the only one who'd sleep with me. Because the other day, we don't know if he farts or whatever, you know. Anyway, so Paul kept it together.
There's a famous story historically where when John and Yoko kind of split up for a minute and John came to California. Were you living in California at that time?
I was in California at that time, yeah.
Did you guys get to hang out?
We got to hang out a lot. And he was doing Harry Nilsson's Pussycat album. And the good and the bad thing about that was that's where Harry lost his voice. Because we were all living in a house in Malibu, like 12 of us. And there was a lot of mood-altering situations. You know, there were one night I go into the studio, there's Keith Moon, Jim Keltner and I, we're the drummers. But we got around Keith and told him he should go home. But he was living at the house. You know what I mean? We were all just hanging out, taking whatever, and doing music. And we, you know, talk about Rock Around the Clock. Have you heard his version? And Jesse Ed Davis, the guitar player, you know, we'd all taken like a hit of speed at the counting. And so it's very fast if you listen. But Jesse Ed actually played the solo. And we were all, wow, Jesse Ed Davis got the solo. So a lot of old stories from the olden days.
I remember going up to the upstairs room at the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset, and there's some sort of a plaque there that I think that Keith's name, your name, a few of the people who used to spend a lot of time up there commemorated.
Yeah, you ended up, you know, it was like, where do you end up? You've been here, you've done this, it's the second night, you know, you've been up 50 hours or whatever, and you just sort of, your body would just sort of take you up those stairs. And we all, you know, because everyone up there was pretty far gone. We'd all hang out together, and it was just a great vibe. And we could go up there and be crazy, you know. One of the other crazy things that happened was I had a house in L.A., and every time Led Zeppelin come, Bonham, his mission in life was to get in a car, come to my house, pick me up, and throw me in the pool. And then I remember vividly one night, I'm dressed up, I'm going out, there's whatever. And he, no, John, I'm dressed. Get in the pool. Yeah, because we hung out quite a bit, John and I. It was so good. And then we'd sort of moved to On the Rocks. That was the next place where we hung out.
Do you remember the first time you saw John Bonham play?
No. But I remember the first time I invited the boys to a party in England. We were having a party. And it's actually a great day to mention this story. And Led Zeppelin come, but, you know, Jimmy can't come. Jimmy doesn't come to parties. Anyway, Jimmy came. And John came. And I had a kit of drums upstairs in the attic. It was like the playroom. And John Bonham was playing them. And Charlie and I, God rest your soul, Charlie and I were holding the bass drum because it was hopping and his leg was getting too short. So we were holding, and there's no photo of Charlie Watts, Ringo Starr, holding the drum, the bass drum. It was far out. Yeah.
Amazing.
So there are moments in the life. I mean, the rest of the day was pretty regular.
Yeah. There was a story that I remember John told on a TV interview where he said when the band broke up, they all knew they were going to be okay, but they were worried about you because you weren't one of the main songwriters, and they were afraid, like, what's Ringo going to do? And then when your work came out, your solo stuff post-Beatles was the most successful of any post-Beatle from the beginning.
I know, it blew the mind, but they were all on my early records. But yeah, I sat in the garden. What am I going to do? You know, I'm not a front guy. And I thought, well, you know, as we spoke before, all family parties, and we had a lot of them, Saturday nights. Yeah. They like to get happy and merry. My mom and her sisters and uncles, and they'd all sing these songs, you know, show tunes and standards.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I'm going to do them. You know, that was my idea. I called George Martin and said, you know, to get me out of the house, it was like, okay, I'm going to sing those songs that I've listened to all my life. And so that's how we started. Then the other record was an accident with Pete Drake. So George is doing All Things Must Pass. He's flown Pete in. You know, we're talking about how it happens. I sent my car to get Pete at the airport. And when he came back, he said, "Oh, hey, Horse, I see you like country music." Because I had a lot of, in those days, cassettes. And as the sessions went on, he said, "You know, you should come to Nashville and make a record." And I can't go to Nashville. What, 3-4 months to make a record? He said, "What?" Nashville Skyline took 2 days. And I said, "Oh, okay." So anyway, I ended up in Nashville, and 2 days later, we'd finished Bukus the Blues.
Amazing.
You know? And then Richard Perry, I was at, you know, these are all side stories. Harry Nilsson and I were doing the Grammys in Nashville because we were great pals. And Richard came, and I thought, oh, Richard, because he produced Harry, man, why don't we stay after the Grammys and do a record? And he was the one, why don't we go to LA?
Yeah.
And we came to LA, and who knew? John arrived, George arrived. You know, the band were on it. I mean, it was like an all-stars record, really.
Yes.
And that I've kept that momentum going on the road. I have all these different places. You have to have hits. And you have to want to have a good time. And, you know, 30-odd years, we've had the all-stars now. So anyway, that's how we got to the Ringo album, which was great.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
If you look at the players, it's like a who's who.
Yeah, and I bet it was super fun. I bet it was really fun to make them as well.
It was. We had a lot of fun, and the No No song was fun because we were doing everything bar the No No.
Was it true at the time or no? No.
That's what I said.
No.
The only thing we weren't doing was No No.
Oh, I see. Did you play on All Things Must Pass? I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, you sound like George. He called me up saying, "Ringo, did you play on All Things Must Pass?" I don't know. I don't remember. And anyway, then when he puts the record out and the little booklet, and he said, Ringo didn't even remember. He didn't mention he didn't remember I hadn't played. You know? So that was a great track, great album.
It's a really good album. So what other post-Beatles stuff did you play on with the other lads?
Well, they played on mine. I played, of course, the Plastic Ono Band was just incredible. Just John and Klaus and I.
Yes.
And John going through Primal Scream. So it wasn't even in between takes. Sometimes in the take, he would get it out. You know, it was great. It's great to be part of that one. I love that record. And because it's three of us, you know what I mean? The dynamics are just really great. And I played on Leon Russell's first album, solo album, Stephen Stills, and I played on B.B. King in London. You know, after my sort of 6 weeks after the breakup, I got on my feet and started moving and playing and doing, you know, and that's all it takes. But I did have like a moment of sadness. What am I going to do? And look what I'm doing now. I'm talking to you, the great Rick Rubin.
I can remember you coming to the studio to play on a Tom Petty song at East West.
Oh, the studio, yeah.
Yeah. You played a smaller drum kit than most of the other drummers who had played, and you seemed to be working less hard than everybody else, and the sound, the tone coming off the drums filled the room much more than anybody else, and it looked like a magic trick. Yeah.
Well, it's how I played. I mean, people say, "Well, how do you play?" Well, this is what I do. You know, it's and the other thing about Tom was I said I'll play on 4 tracks because I didn't want to live with him forever because he was a beautiful human being. He was. I called him once. I was making a record. And I called him and he said, "I'll do it." I said, "I haven't even asked you yet." He said, "Look, I'll do it." And he came and sang this song that somebody else had sang with me, but the management thought it would ruin their whole career. So Tom just came out, and I was in some of their videos, so we were hanging, you know. But when I said, "Okay, I'll play on 4," by 3 I'd had enough. As you were there, I said, and he said, trickier than you thought, aren't they? Because there were some like weirdness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember at that point in time, we really would orchestrate how the drums would go. And you were used to a different style of playing where you would just kind of groove through it and then play fills. And it was fascinating to me the way you worked. And it really worked out great for the stuff you played on with Tom.
Yeah, good. They sent me a gold disc. You know, he got a gold disc for that record.
Great.
So he sent me one. I was looking around, but I've just moved around my some of my stuff, and I've taken that one down. Anyway, Rick, you got one more minute.
Okay, I'm good. It's a pleasure speaking to you and seeing you again.
Okay.
And I look forward to doing it again soon.
I'm going to FaceTime Paul and tell me you're a pushover.
Please do.
He called me today because he knew. He said, "Oh, you know, you'll want to know about drums and music." Okay. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Talk to you later, man.
Thanks to Ringo Starr for talking about the good old days with Rick. To hear Ringo's new EP, Change the World, and all of our favorite Ringo songs, check out BrokenRecordPodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter @BrokenRecord. Broken Record is produced with help from Leah Rose, Jason Gambrell, Martin Gonzalez, Eric Sandler, and Jennifer Sanchez, with engineering help from Nick Chafee. Our executive producer is Mia Lobel. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like this show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.